So Nairobi was always a second home for me. I've been coming here since many years. My half passport is filled with the trips to Nairobi. But then it was such a sleepless night for all of us that, oh, what's happening? Our servers are going down. Now, because our servers are not available, our network is not available. So it was like just a chaos that, okay, what's happening? We would request somebody on the field that, are the devices up there? So like, yeah, the device is up, but it says that it's not working. And then back in the application, it was not available. And so we had like a lot of these things. So ethanol is basically a byproduct of molasses. So, and that's what we used. And of course, we treat it so that people don't consume it.
Also, just basic ethanol, so you have to put a little bit of this chemical so the
Yeah,
town drunkard doesn't come and start getting into the canisters.
Correct.
Yeah, I guess it could be a side business for you guys to start selling. Hi, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the Nairobi Gold Rush podcast, where we're bringing the top leaders in tech in Nairobi to us, and they're going to be teaching us about all their great stories of resilience and how they have basically built themselves up into their career here in Nairobi and are just basically developing the Nairobi ecosystem for tech. So I've got a great guest with us here today. We have Samir Soni. He's a tech leader at KOKO Networks. So welcome, Samir, to the podcast. Maybe you could tell us just a little bit about what is KOKO Networks and what are you doing these days?
Yeah. Thank you, Scott, for having me here. I'm Samir Soni. I'm from a city called Sagar in the central part of India. I've been with KOKO Networks for now nearly 10 years, and the company is into clean cooking solutions. So they provide the alternate solution instead of charcoal, so promoting people to use a clean cooking solution, which is more affordable.
Okay.
And we did some pilot testing back like 10 years back, and then in Mozambique, Uganda, and then rolled out in Kenya in commercial in 2019. And since then, we have 1.3 million customers using this product on daily basis.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. 1.3 million customers, mainly across Kenya, you'd say?
Mainly across Kenya in 10 cities. We also launched in Rwanda 1.5 years back, and that's on the growing stage.
Wow. Well, that's pretty impressive on that short period of time to get that many customers. Well, it would be interesting to know from you. So you mentioned you come from India, and
Yes.
you said you come from like a small town in India.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
right? More the
Yes.
rural area? Is that correct?
No, not rural area. I would say like a tier 2 or tier 3 city.
Yeah. Okay.
My parents still live there. I moved around for my studies and work, and I keep visiting whenever the work situation allows.
Yeah. And what was it like as you were a kid there? I mean, did you?
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting question. So you could imagine like going to a suburban city in Kenya and traveling there. So it's a small city. You had lots of playgrounds. So we would play in the evening and all. And I had a very interesting childhood. Was mostly a very studious student. So it's reading through the books, doing through the curriculum and all. Did that. And then I actually wanted to be in army. So it was very interesting juncture in my life. So prepared for army, get selected all the way through. And for some medical reasons, from my eyesight, I couldn't make it through.
Oh,
but then,
but you went all the way through the process, and then there at the end, it didn't work out though. Yeah.
It's a very interesting story in India. If you see, people aspire to go in army, but a lot of the big people you will see, one of our former president, one of our big celebrities, they wanted to be in the Indian army, but they couldn't make it through. But they made big in life. So what I learned from there was like, if plan A fails in life, there is plan B. And there's not just plan B, but all the 25 alphabets.
Sure.
So
and it seems like it's worked out for you. Okay. I know myself, I have very bad eyesight myself, and I would never be able to be in the army.
Yeah.
So I think it's a common thread. There's certain things that people might want to do, and yet there's something maybe limiting, and like that plan B is really, really helpful. So,
yes.
So you kind of came from this, I guess, kind of average background, kind of in the kind of middle tier city.
Yeah.
You're always pretty studious. Did you always know you wanted to be in the engineering path? Like,
yes.
What you just from like day one? Did your parents encourage that? Were they were your parents into engineering, or how did you get into it?
It's a very nice question again. So my mom family is mostly in the business side, so they're into the jewelry business, and my dad family is all engineers, into the army, into the railways. So for me, like, it was the engineering was the de facto thing, that this is what I want to pursue. And for my graduation, I read computer science because back in 2000s this was really picking up, and so I studied computers. I did the same for my masters as well. So the education went on the computers, and then for the job as well, I took the technology stream and went ahead.
Yeah, and when you were coming up, even before you went to the campus to study computer science, did you have access to computer at the home at that time? Or,
Yes.
So you, even from then, you were able to get on, start learning about how these things work from an early age?
So I think, like, I would consider myself a bit lucky. The globalization opened up in 1991, and we got access to computers like late 90s, early 2000s. So to a very good machines, I would say, of those era. And that allowed us to pursue computers and really explore the technology. What are the operations behind that you could do, and what are the potentials? So that way, I think, like, that's also one of the main reason why the Indian subcontinent has emerged as one of the software hub.
Yeah, I mean, great access, and it seems like India has it's so big, right? It's like it's so quickly growing, and so many engineers coming out of India. It seems like a very competitive place. Did you find that when you were like trying to go to study at university, was it a very competitive environment?
Yes, I think it's a very competitive environment generally. Like, if you are giving exam this year, you are competing with 300,000 students.
Oh.
And if we think that, okay, I'll prepare again because I couldn't score well, and let me prepare again. After 1 year, you are competing with at least 400,000 students. So that the competition keeps on going up year by year.
Oh, wow. So, and how did you do in that process? Were you
I think I did fairly well.
You did okay, kind of.
Yeah.
Somewhere
I would really thank my father for it. He's a very strict guy, and he made sure that we do something well in our life. And I think
you didn't want to mess up and do the wrong thing. A very strict household. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that kind of helps steer you towards a path of success as you were going there. So, I guess, did you go directly into work after you finished university, or how did that work? Did you get a job like right out?
Yeah. So a few things like which was very clear to me, that after my education, I want to get into the work as soon as possible. And luckily, like, or even for my masters, I got sponsorship by the government. So it was all paid by the government. So it was like really an opportunity, I would say. And so I went into that, and after that, I got an opportunity with very big company in India, but I had some mindset that I want to start my career in startups, because startups, really, you get an opportunity to explore end to end. You are not just doing the product requirement gathering, but also building the test cases and whatnot. So I joined a startup back in my early days, and since then it's a mix of startup, big companies, and so on.
Yeah. And did you at that time, were you did you move to the big city by that time? You kind of had gotten out of your hometown by then?
Yeah. So I think, like, right after my school, I moved out of my hometown to another big city. So again, like, my college, and the first job happened to be in the tier 1 city. So it's been almost now, I would say, 15 years.
Yeah. So you haven't, I mean, I guess you go back to visit family, but you're now a more metropolitan type of person. So you started. So when you tell us about your first job, I mean, what did you kind of find interesting about it when you got started out?
It was very interesting. So I would I remember one of my first CTOs of the company, who happened to my mentor as well as manager, and then he guided us into the clean code. Like, I think, like, one of the best principles that I learned from my very first organization was that think big. You are not building things for just 6 months or 1 year. If you do it well, then your applications would last for years to come. And that was one of the good things. And it all starts with basics. So one of the things were test-driven development, clean code practices, and they helped us to really lay the foundation of good software practices. And I think till date, I really admire those things. And for that, like Bob Martin and all of those people, because they built the foundation of the modern software today.
Sure. It seems like if you have early in your career, you have somebody who kind of puts you on that path that can help you later as you go on. Because if you learn bad habits in the beginning, right, then you can develop this bad code, and it really can be detrimental to you as you go forward. So, so you say, like, the first time, but what was the startup you were doing when you first start out? Like what type of products were you working on?
So I started with a company called Equal Experts, and they are now a prominent big company in the UK. But they were in those days very like a small startup based in Pune. I got into that job, and then we were working on one of the first open source project for MongoDB. MongoDB was recently introduced. Back in those days, AWS had started coming in, and so we were building a incremental backup tool, which later MongoDB absorbed it, and so they built their own tools based on that. So the open source like really opened channels for me to explore and tell that how does open source community works, what are those best practices, and so those were the initial project. And then later I worked with Telefonica, which is one of the largest telecom giant in the UK, and there I had applied what I had learned in my past year with clean code and all into like how does big corporations work. So how do you build applications, how do you really stress test, what are those multiple environments, and so on.
And I guess through all this time you're kind of like individual contributor, like computer
Yes.
engineer. I guess you're working with all kinds of different languages and learning all kinds of different technologies when you're there.
Yes.
I mean, I guess it was each company kind of dictating, okay, this one you're learning maybe Java, or this one you're learning Python. That time.
I think then I would really again say like it all comes with a philosophy. All the people with the clean code background, they really ask you to try everything. So back in those days, we were using Java, but then Java was used for a reason. But then they were very open that go and try out Python, go and try out Go, go and try out Rust when they came in down the line. But then that encouraged to explore that what all these different languages have to offer, and why should you not use something and why should you use something, especially for a banking applications or banking operations. As developers, we are very excited to introduce something, but then they have pros and cons. You can't just introduce something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's quite interesting because there's always a lot of debate about in the industry of which programming languages should you use. This one's better than this one.
Yes.
And I've always taken the philosophy of like we'll sort of use what works for us. Right? You find one that will work for your use case scenario. But it was kind of funny when I used to work for the U.S. government. So before I moved to Kenya, I spent about 10 years in my career working on large government projects for the U.S. government. And we had a CTO who came into the organization. I worked at the Revenue Service for a while. About 10,000 engineers, or 10,000, let's say not engineers, but IT employees working on software. And the CTO one day walks in, we were using, let's say .NET, C#. And one day he comes in, it's like, no, everybody thinks changing to Java. And everybody's looking, going, well, did the guy, is he talking about his coffee? Like what's going on here? So there's all these like, philosophies of where, the tech leader can really drive a lot of like what's going to happen with the technology stack.
True.
So when did you, I know you're kind of more like a leader now. When did you start making that transition? Was it when you went to KOKO Networks when you started that, or did you get kind of management type experience before you?
Yeah, I would say like a slightly before KOKO Networks. I joined a startup and in Bombay, and so I was my first job was in Pune in India. I started there, but after 2 years, I felt like I want to go back to Mumbai because that's where I had also read my masters, and that's where like I luckily found a very good startup, and they were just three people. So I joined as the fourth employee, and then we grew the company from 4th to almost like 50 people in a span of 2 to 3 years. And there I worked on a lot of projects from Sodexo and all. And that is where I gained a lot of my experience into the leadership roles as well, I would say, because like writing good software is an art. Okay, good. But then how do you pitch to a client? How do you, if you are working with somebody, how do you present your application, what you have developed? How do you make business use cases and so on? So that's where I would say I learned a lot of these leadership skills.
And that's a hard transition, I would say, for a lot of us tech guys, right? We talk about the servers and the cloud infrastructure and all these type of things. But did you find that a pretty natural fit for you to be able to do that, or was it kind of difficult, challenging?
I think I would say it was a natural thing. Also, like what I learned from the leaders in that company was, and mostly in the startups, that whatever job you're doing is very important. So if you want to transition and if you want to learn something, first find that who would do that job. So that helped us to always fill that gap. And then if I want to learn about the management, then okay, I could learn that, but firstly take care of your job. So that's how we built the company. So we built a lot of team members, and I think that same philosophy we applied for all the engineers, which later allowed them to go into different directions they wanted to go to.
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess something that's I find kind of interesting now is, okay, we're here in Nairobi, and you were doing all this work in India. So how did it turn out that you ended up being here in Nairobi, so far away from your home area?
I think that's a very good question. So Nairobi was always a second home for me. I've been coming here since many years. My half passport is filled with the trips to Nairobi. So I would really thank like my stars there. Then coming to Nairobi was a natural transition. So we have a very good team in India. And then again, like when I wanted to explore something more on the business, on the management side of things, I was presented with this, that would you want to go to Nairobi and explore something? And that's when my transition happened.
Oh, so was this even before you were working at KOKO that you had experience coming to Nairobi, or did it all start with KOKO?
No, so I started coming to Nairobi with KOKO Networks, but I traveled to other places like Singapore and others with the other companies.
Yeah,
but
so you've been kind of pretty world traveled, then, you would say? Or
yes.
And what's kind of the favorite place that you've been in your travels?
I think like UK was one of the favorite places, especially between the summers. So July to September, I would say, because you have the full day, like your day starts at 5, ends at 10.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty long day. So that was one. Singapore was also one of the very good place. I would say China was also one of the very nice place I had visited.
Yeah.
So
and you found those places to be quite different from India, I guess, in terms of.
I think like if I just put development of the different nations into time scale, then there are just you start making sense that okay, this country is just a few years ahead of those.
Yeah.
So that's how I would put it.
And where do you see Nairobi in that spectrum when you compare it to India and Singapore and China?
Nairobi is a very I would say has a huge spectrum. It on some scales it's way ahead of very other countries, and on a certain scales it's a bit a few years behind. Not far, I would say. In a lot of places in the East Africa and generally Africa, I think like Kenya and generally, and Nairobi is way ahead of its time. And I see like it has good potential in the coming years.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people who come from outside of Kenya or East Africa, from the U.S. or Europe or Canada, I think that Nairobi sometimes is viewed in a few different lights. One is in terms of maybe humanitarian assistance or safaris, animals, things like that. But a lot of times the technology that we have here, which you and I are on the forefront of, isn't always there in the conversation, but it's quite an interesting one because, like you said, Nairobi's just slightly maybe behind some of these countries, but catching up pretty quickly, it seems like. So it seems like really, really great things will happen. Well, what was it like for you as you transitioned to Nairobi? Did you find it to be like, what did you find to be very different about it than you were used to?
I think it's a very disciplined life. People are very humble. The traffic is very disciplined, and people are really amazing. So of all the engineers, the team that we have worked with, and we have a lot of team members who have been with KOKO Networks for years. And I think that tells a lot about the perseverance and hardworking nature of the people. So that is something which is commendable out here. And when I even compare with, say, cybersecurity, then Nigeria is something that really comes up. Fintech markets, the e-commerce market, and healthcare and all. So I feel like Nairobi and Kenya has a lot of potentials for those things.
Yeah, and I guess when you came to Nairobi, you came with your family.
Yes.
And how did the whole family feel about the transition?
Yeah, I think like my family was quite accommodative. They didn't make a lot of fuss of for me moving here. We got a good place here to stay, and generally like we got a good support from the work as well as from the other friends that we had. And that's where I found like Nairobi is to be as my just second home. And recently, like when my parents also visited, they were just awed by the place. They were so, and I think like a lot of it goes to the media. The very good parts are not available. So maybe we should, people should try making movies out here and do something where the good parts of the city, the vibrant part comes out. and then people would know like, oh, this is what it is. And for me, like honestly, Nairobi was just another city in the UK because the housing, it was more European in
kind of more European
yeah.
style than you were used to before.
Yeah.
It is true. I mean, I think we have so many nice things here in Kenya. I mean, the coast of Kenya is, really beautiful place.
Yeah.
I mean, lots of green outdoor spaces. I've never traveled to India before, but like some of the cities I imagine are quite chaotic, very congested with traffic. Same like we have here in Nairobi, but maybe even a scale higher. Everyone I've talked to, it's like, wow, this traffic is crazy. And yeah. So I can imagine it'd be a pretty smooth transition, and you've been able to find a community here in Nairobi and kind of just how long have you been living here?
It's more almost like just 2 years.
Yeah, just 2 years.
Yeah.
So you've been here full time for 2 years.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very good. I've lived here for 12 years. I finally, after just this last year, I got my permanent residence, which
very nice.
is I guess a certificate that allows you to be in the country pretty free and clear.
Yeah.
Of course, it was supposed to take 7 years to get the certificate.
True.
The government offices are not
Yeah.
always the most friendly to work with, but we finally did get the permanent residence. So it's things, and I don't know how that compares to India as well. It's like working with the government regulations and processes and everything. Is it very similar?
I think it's quite similar.
Yeah.
And the more I learn about these bodies, it's like they have these for a reason. So it's from outsiders, and especially coming from the startup background where you just walk to a desk and say like, hey, get this job done. You really like start appreciating after a few years of interaction. So yeah, it's the same. I would say. And
maybe, so at KOKO Networks, would you say the culture is there? Is it more like a startup environment? Is it more like an established company now?
It's a mix of both, honestly. I would say it's primarily a startup where like the room for experimentation is there. It is appreciated. Of course, the risk is huge that, okay, you want to do experiments, but then how do you find your limited sandbox environment so you can run some pilot? The thing is like when we started in 2019, until then we were like quite explorative, that we would just go that let's explore something, let's do something very boldly. But then as customer base increased in 2020, 2021 and 2, and especially 23, I would say, there we became a bit cautious because you don't want to launch something where something suddenly comes crashing down. We also had like several incidents that would happen just in the midnight when you think like, oh, I've deployed this fancy feature so I can sleep at night. And then that same night you realize that everything is coming crashing down.
Yeah.
So you spend your sleepless nights. So I would say like a lot of things to learn. But yeah, at its core, at its heart, it's still a startup.
Yeah.
With a sense of maturity, a big startup or a big corporation, that how do you lead to or move towards success?
Yeah. Do you have any kind of crazy stories about these crashes that would happen?
Like, tons of them.
Like what's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you?
Tons of them. So I think this was somewhere in 2019 somewhere. We had launched something, and then all of a sudden, like our services were just live, and we saw that. So for our field devices, we have 3,000 of those field devices. They all send telemetry messages to us, and we receive it every minute. If for any reason we don't receive a message, then we mark that device after offline, say after 5 minutes of inactivity. And then for those offline, then we have to explore that, okay, what happened, and investigate and so on. So this was an interesting situation where our server was bombarded because we recently went live. And some of these cybersecurity or DDoS bot had detected us that the new service is live. And back in those days, we were just had launched, so we had not put in all those security measures that we should have put in. And then we had like suddenly DDoS attack, and then our services came crashing down. The good thing was that because we had used AWS already, so we had to just put some guardrails around using the best practices of web access or firewall, and that's when it contained everything. But then it was such a sleepless night for all of us that, oh, what's happening? Our servers are going down now because our servers are not available, our network is not available. So it was like just a chaos that, okay, what's happening? We would request somebody on the field that the device is up. They would say like, yeah, the device is up, but it says that it's not working. And then back in the application, it was not available. And so we had like a lot of these things. down the line, we also introduced Dockers and others. So there also, when we were just learning all those things, so we had some
It's
interesting.
kind of a learning experience, I think, for most of us in the tech industry.
Yeah.
As your app starts growing or your platform starts growing, you learn a lot of these things by the fire, I guess.
Yes, yes.
You have these crazy crashes and things are going down, and then that's how we learn things, because I think most of us, even in the school or university, you learn things, but you don't really quite have the skills to
Yes.
deal with these type of scenarios until they happen. Well, maybe for our listeners, for KOKO, so you mentioned that KOKO, so they can understand the product, it's kind of like selling gas, right? It's like
No, so it's a ethanol based cooker.
Yeah.
So it's a 2-burner stove that we sell to the customers, and they can buy from these agents where we have, and we have a fuel dispensing machine which looks very similar to an ATM machine but just a bit big, and it stores fuel inside it. It has an Android tablet where you can interact, say enter your PIN, you can sign up and all of those things, and then make payments using M-Pesa, which is quite seamless. And then once the payment has gone through, you have a wallet, and from that wallet you can buy fuel, you can buy cookers, and you can perform any operations. The fuel is transferred in a 2.3 liter canister, and this canister is just transferred.
Is it like a propane or something like that? Or
yes, you could say that. Yeah. And so ethanol is basically a byproduct of molasses. So, and that's what we used, and of course we treat it so that people don't consume it.
Also, it's just basic ethanol, so you have to put a little bit of this chemical so the town drunkard doesn't come and start getting into the canisters.
Correct.
Yeah, I guess it could be a side business for you guys.
So
So I guess when we talk about like selling this type of fuel and the cookers, because when you start thinking about it, you wouldn't think it'd be like a technical thing, but like you're explaining, you have a.
I think that's where I would say a lot of credit goes to the user research that was done in 2010 to 2015. So the founders of the company, they were experimenting in Mozambique, Uganda, and all of those places where they really did pilot with totally manual systems, where you have a cooker, no technology at all.
Like just a sales agent or somebody selling at the shop.
Exactly, yeah. And then the biggest realization was that majority of our time was being spent in the logistics of the fuel. So we quickly realized that if we don't build a technology like a self-serving system for this fuel, then we won't be able to scale it at that scale, because the fuel was sold in those 1 liter, 2 liter pulpit bottles, wherein you have to put a lot of logistics into it. You have to have trucks and shops and so on. So we said let's look at some technology solution that could help us, where the customers can buy it by themselves. You don't need to you didn't need an agent, and it's simple enough.
And how many of these stations do you now have?
So we have nearly 3,000 of these stations across Kenya, in 10 cities.
Wow, that's pretty efficient. So you don't, instead of having to need 3,000 sales agents or something. I mean, I guess you still have to have somebody to kind of maintain and operate, but you don't have to have like a dedicated sales force out there to.
Exactly. So, I mean, the company is still like roughly 800 or so people. And within that, we have different roles divided. So the network operations team is primarily responsible for maintaining of this network and so on. And they have the fuel operations and maintenance team, which does those routinely checks. These devices or those fuel ATMs are installed in an agent shop, which is a mom and pop shop. And that helps us. So you don't need a person because agent also gets benefit by selling fuel, by selling cookers. So they have another revenue. So it helps them and it helps us.
Oh, okay. Well, that's quite interesting. And so I guess, maybe a buzzword that uses with your product would be IoT, maybe. Is that what you would say?
Yes.
Like you basically are trying to gather information about how these machines are performing. Is that sort of right? Kind of controlling them remotely? And
yes. So fair amount of IoT technology has gone into it. So we have our own proprietary custom boards that we have built over these years. Of course, we procure different components, but it's all assembled in-house, and then they are deployed to these different agent shops.
Yeah. And so, with your role in the company, what specifically, if you had to describe your job role, what exactly do you do for them?
Okay. So I started my journey when we were just like two engineers building the backend application, and so using simple Python and all of those things. Gradually moving into Docker. At that time, team was growing. Uh, Somewhere like 2022s and 23s, where it became evident that we need two functions. One is the build function, which focuses on building the applications, building the innovation side, and we need another team which focuses on the run side of things, so that you can ensure that your builds are optimized, your services are optimized. If something is not working, then you can notify the right team at right time. At some point, we were also having this an engineer to have different rotating roles. So say I would have a support for that week, and in some other week somebody else would have that. It worked well when we were small, but it didn't work when we were scaling up. So we realized that we need operations into the technology function. So that's when the thought of creating the site reliability engineers, creating product support engineers, all of those came in. So I started with building those two teams, and then gradually looking at the other operational teams. So that's the technology operations, which is the run side of the business.
Okay, yeah. So when we talk about product support, so essentially it's kind of like, maybe you could describe that a little bit too.
Sure. Yeah. So a customer is having a problem on the field. Now it's a real customer. It's a mom who has come to buy fuel. She's not able to buy the fuel, or an agent is trying to do something, but he's not able to. Now those are the real customers affected. So for them, we have a dedicated call center. They would make a call on our hotline number. One of the call center staff would start investigating. They have a playbook, so they start following through the issues. But there are sometimes issues which are technical. Say, for example, your payment gateway is not able to process your response, or maybe payment gateway has done, but the confirmation is SMSs are not going because there's some telecommunication, there's some delay happening. Now, how do you notify that to the customer that this is the problem, this is what it is, and so on? An engineer who developed that application is best placed, but most of these issues happen off working hours.
Yeah, maybe nighttime or something.
Exactly. So your developer is on the way home, or he is at night, and then your issues start coming up. And then how do you resolve it? So we studied through various models, and that's when we thought like product support engineering model, or technical support, as people say, really works, which is primarily in L2 support for the customer care. So customer care would escalate that this XYZ issue is happening. The teams would start investigating because they all come from engineering background. So they would figure out that what's happening. The mandate is that majority of these issues should be able to be resolved by them, and which they are able to. And there are cases where, say, application has some edge case, which was not considered during the design phase, testing phase, and which has only come up during the application, when the application went live. So they would go ahead and fix it, and notify the teams to challenge and fix it. So that's what generally product support engineering is.
Sure. The way I kind of think about it is, for instance, anytime maybe it's a website or an app I have a problem with, and I always call maybe their help desk to get support. And usually the first person that you talk to, they just say, well, have you turned it on and off again? Or, clear your cache. Or they have these like standard things, but usually it's like, I'll turn it on or off again, or it's not our problem, or something.
I think the most interesting one has been when you have some internet issues, especially on just which is very, very limited to a region. So they would say like, okay, my application is not loading, my customer CRM is not loading, but then the team would say like, it's loading perfectly on my side. And then it's like, I can't ship your machine to them.
Yeah, exactly. Engineers are notorious for saying that as well. When they develop something, it works on my machine, but okay, but it's not working on my machine. So your guys are kind of like your team of engineers is like the next level up, I guess, from that is what you would say.
Yes.
So whenever they've tried turning it on and off again, then now there's a person with a more engineering focus who may not be the software engineer who's programming it, but can deep dive into triage the issue essentially. So
I think so one of the mandate for me has been like, all the support team that I have comes from engineering background. So they are all from there, and my aim is like not to limit them to just the support. So we do several projects. One of the mandate when we were migrating from the Docker to Kubernetes, or vanilla Dockers to Kubernetes. So this was like, we want to train our technical support staff so that they can do other things as well along with supporting
do
the
some very
customers.
technical
Yes.
things. So, which is important, because when somebody calls for support and they need a quick answer, you don't want your person they're assisting, you don't want them to just not be able to do anything.
Yeah.
They need to be able to take some steps to triage the problem and to
Correct.
do it quickly. So that's why it's always nice to have very technical skills in that team, or coming from an engineering background. That's a very smart thing. It sounds like that y'all have done on your team.
Yeah.
And I guess you have this idea that we call like what would you call it? Like a site reliability engineering?
Yes.
Or do you have something like that? And you could describe what that is for maybe some of our listeners?
Sure. So we have a site reliability engineering team. We created almost 4 years back. We used to call it technology operations team at that time. And then that's what the department now eventually is called. So site reliability engineering focuses on, again, the run part of the application. So all of them come from application development background. So they have the experience of building applications. Some of them were mobile developers, then app developers, the ERP developers, and so on. And till date, they are doing those projects as well as focusing on the site reliability part, which is more to do with the cloud applications, how they work, understanding more about AWS, GCP, and Azure, and then also about how technologies work all together. So we say like it's very easy that, okay, let's launch an EKS cluster, but what does it really mean? That if your pod is going down, then at what frequency should it come up? What thresholds do you set up? What monitoring system should I set up? We encourage open source as a philosophy. So exploring that what open source project makes sense. So we have a lot of Grafana on our side, which helps us to monitor our network as well as the internal infra. And all of this work is done by the site reliability engineering group.
Yeah, it sounds quite complex. I mean, it seems like by the time that you get to a company of this size and you're managing, 3,000 machines across, and mainly does all of this is there just to support the machines essentially and the applications around the machines?
So this is, in a nutshell, you could say that, because at the end of the day, we have a mix of hardware and software technologies working. And so whatever hardware we have, we say, for example, the fuel ATM, it has a software piece running on it because the customer is going to interact. They don't care about like what battery do you have or what capacity of pump do you have.
Right.
All they care about is like when I say buy, the machine should dispense out the fuel to me and I should be able
Very
to
simple,
do. Yeah. So it's a mix of both. Within the technology operations, yes, they are responsible to ensure that everything is up and running.
And so I assume now with your role, you do staff management as part of that, or
Yes.
you have staff to report to you.
Yeah.
So how has that been for you? Have you seen anything very different from being? I mean, obviously you're very technical. You have a very established engineering background across multiple disciplines. What's that been like? Doing more of the staff management side of things as your career track.
I think like from my very early career, I had a principle that when we hire somebody, when they think about their own leadership skills and their seniority, as they move up the ladders, they should think about mentoring somebody. It cannot be that you are just climbing up a technical leader, but you don't have skills to how to manage people.
Yeah.
Because then that would technically you will build a very nice sound solution, but you wouldn't be able to communicate to your clients, to your own team. And that's not healthy for anyone.
Yeah.
So for that, it's very important to look into the staff management. So we build this culture that as people go into the senior roles, they have somebody to mentor into, because that also helps the path for the newbie to learn and look up to somebody. Of course, the room is open, so we have flat desk, no hierarchies per se.
Yeah.
Anybody can go and talk to anyone.
Sure.
So that helps.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because, at least for myself, from CTO position, I've always found like it helps to really know the technical side of things as much as you can. Like, it's like a lot of engineers can respect if you like, okay, I sort of understand how that works, and you don't want to not know how the details are happening. But at the same time, as you go further up the career ladder and you're doing more and more staff management, it becomes more increasingly hard to be in the we call it the weeds or the details of the technical things that are happening at every level. How have you found that from your role? Is where you are at your current role still allowed you to get that kind of good balance between the two? Or
I think it has been a good balance, and throughout the company as well, we have tried to make the same. Of course, there are a path for people to choose a purely technical path and a managerial and technical path as well.
Sure.
So, but like for me and for most of my peers, I would say the technical as well as managerial path has worked well. And so we have the policies, the ways of working also supports. So if you are a people guy, you don't have to just do people work. There are opportunities where you try to set up a process which is technical enough. For example, most recently, I'm setting up another project for another team, which is to do with the incident management for that. And we are aligning that process with the other incident management process that we have across the company, which means I have to understand their ways of working, their tool stack, but also want to align them with the same process, with the same teams, so that if an incident happens in the field or with somebody in the staff in the company, then they don't have to like, hey, call this number for this issue, call this number for this. No, you just go to this team, they will do the triage and you'll be helped.
Yeah, that's kind of the nice thing with being with, I mean, I guess you would call KOKO more kind of a startup, right? I mean,
Yes.
being able to have that flexibility to set up these processes and without making them be too crazy, I guess. 'Cause I think that's one of the critical things for innovation is being sure that you have, I mean, you need somebody like yourself who's been in the industry and, worked through these processes before and, add structure, but still be able to understand, hey, we don't need it to be crazy. We want it to be like very, very flexible. Well, that's pretty good. So do you have any kind of crazy stories around staff management? Like have you had anything that's been really surprising to you or something that's just really shocked you when you were managing people now?
Not
Or
that
at least anything you feel comfortable?
yeah, no, I think like not that really comes, but I think like what has really stood out is when people are very up to the point when they are upfront. As you go through your own career, there's a way of your own life, like how you approach. So for example, like I'm not so direct as a person, but I've come across many people, my juniors, my not immediate, maybe some other reports, which were very direct to the point. And I think that is very nice. And even for the juniors, I would say like, if you expect something or if you feel like we should try out something, then open your heart and go ahead and say it. Who knows, like it may just open some other doors for you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, for me, I come from, the U.S. There's a certain culture we have there.
Yeah.
I assume in India, there's a different culture that's there. And then in Nairobi, it's a completely different culture in a way. So sometimes I could imagine that there could be some cultural differences that come into play. When at KOKO, with your team, are you mainly hiring staff here in Nairobi or are you hiring staff in India? Like what's the breakdown that you have there?
I think we have a very balanced approach from very early days. So for all the operations, our team is based here. They are all here. We have a very like large engineering team as well, both on the hardware and software front. For some roles have been in different parts of the world, but they are for different reasons. Either it makes sense to get the talent here, but then when we look up for a position, we look in every place where we are operating, not just to this country or some others, because we want to expand to multiple African as well as Latin American nations. So yeah, we look forward to so there's no bias per se or decision that we'll go in this region only or that region only.
Okay. So, but it seems like most of the time these days, it's a fairly large percentage here in Kenya.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you have
that's where the operations is. I guess it makes a lot of sense for you to
and the good part is like you get a very good talent pool. So I've worked with amazing engineers here. The Android application that we have, which was built here, was built by one of the finest engineers here. So yeah.
No, I mean definitely there's a really good talent pool here. I think that's the same approach we take with SafeBoda. We're hiring most of our roles for engineering here in the Nairobi market because there's such a great upcoming talent pool of good engineers that are coming along. But yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the cultural differences, I know for me I think it was even more so when I first moved to Nairobi from first coming from the US and you'd start managing people and like one big difference between the US and the Nairobi market is timeliness. So, everything in the US is very schedule based, very, okay, the meeting's going to start at 9 a.m. And, I'd go out to some of the rural areas and, 9 a.m. could mean that we'd start at noon, or something, very, very different. Now, Nairobi, it's a little bit different, but in some of the rural areas, maybe due to transport, challenges or things like that. That was a big cultural thing that I noticed. Like it was very different, which made it quite challenging in the beginning for managing staff.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, and like really, like this is something that we have also experienced, but I think it varies from place to place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I guess as you as the leader kind of setting the culture for at your company, how, okay, here's how
Correct.
we operate and here's what the expectations are.
Yeah. I think like one thing which I found here is like generally the culture, because the office and day starts quite early here and ends early, and that helps to set the tone. And majority of like our experience has been that everybody comes on time and leaves on time,
Yeah.
which is quite good for both work and as well as personal balance that they say.
Yeah. Another thing I found kind of challenging that seems like you have similar experiences is that, you know, when you're going into your technology stack and, okay, things are going to crash and things are going to have a lot of problems, and you need staff to be available on maybe nights or weekends. How was your experience with that? Was your team just on board and say, yeah, I'm there and available? Or was it a struggle for you to convince people like, hey, this is critical? I know it's midnight, but I need you on the call.
Yeah, I think like there are a lot of I'm sure like amusing stories and videos where people just demand something that, hey, you have to be available, and I think people think that it would work. It'll work for at first time, second time, but that nobody is doing it for heart.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important. And one of the experience that I had back in I think 2012 somewhere, where one of our managers requested us to stay back because we had a late night deployment, and it was quite amusing to see that somebody is requesting you to stay back, because out like in some other places I've seen where you're just told that you have to do this and there's no question, there's no room for discussion. And then that said that no, like if you value your team, they will value you. Like it's the payback is huge, and I think that has been even in our culture as well. So we tried the same. So if somebody is expected to be say off the schedule, then in what ways can you compensate that? So maybe they can take it the next day off or some other comp off, so that the person feels that yes, the company and the team respects my time as well. And it brings that really, or fosters that feeling of belongingness together, that we are in this together. It's not that, okay, you are a tech guy, you're responsible for this, so I'll leave you alone. I think like there have been even for me, with me, the situations where founders were there online with us during some crisis, and they could have just yelled at us that, hey guys, what are you doing? It's your job. And then it's like none of that happened. And instead, like we got appreciation that we understand what you are going through and we'll support you through. And I think that has helped us to really build a good culture.
Yeah. I know when I first started at SafeBoda, we had a real bad problem with the app was crashing. And it was one of the first mandates that I had was we were having a lot of technical issues. And one of the challenges we were having is, developers would deploy software during the middle of the day and, peak hours when we 5 p.m. rush hour, and we had a lot of bike and car transport we needed to do, and system would just crash. And, and I knew that, for my job, it was critical. I had to have the system up and running 100% of the time. So, I first had to kind of come with this unpopular opinion. I would say that we're going to have to deploy things at nighttime, because we can't be deploying we can't crash the system during the rush hour times. But the way I tried to approach it was to say, look, okay, I'll be there during the night on every deployment with you guys. I'm not asking you to come. I'm going to be there too. And the goal is that this is not a good thing for us to continue to operate in this way. We're going to put in better infrastructure, better technology that reduces the risk of us, deploying during the day or doing, so that this isn't a long-term thing that we have to do. We're working towards, a more sustainable solution for everybody, because this is because I don't want you doing this. I don't expect you to be here at nighttime. Our goal, and I'm going to be there with you to say like, I'm doing it too. This is bothering me as well. So I have a motivation to stop doing this, and now we come up with a better, more sustainable solution.
Yeah, true. I mean, so we also like try to do the deployments now. I think like now it's more feasible where we can do anytime deployment, but especially with the business hours, we try to do either late night or early morning. And I think the team arrangement really helps us, because a part of our team is based in India. So if there's something early morning, then early morning here is still like just say 7 a.m. for them. And it's easy for somebody to ask like 7 a.m. can we do the deployment, rather than asking for somebody to do deployment at 2 a.m. in the night. So those things work. And I think like the deployment should happen in the week. So that's one of the mandate for us. Nothing on the weekends, no matter what. Do it Monday to Friday and try doing it in business hours. Maybe or maybe working hours. And how can we reach that aim where you schedule something, the deployment happens automatically and you just get notified it's a success or failure. So you look into, you don't need to do something and you don't need a human person. So that's what the ultimate aim is.
What would you say is the next steps for the company? Are y'all planning any new products or continue to grow your network of machines? What's the...
Yeah, a couple of things. So on the innovation side of things, we are exploring at building new next generation of the dispensing machines. So that's happening on the expansion side and then launching in the other areas. We did several of these projects because we are in the dispensing space. So we did some projects for World Food Health Program. So that was really fortunate where our technology could help us serve the people in the where they had to be dislocated or they have a just in between transition. So we did those. And there are a couple of other projects which is in the works, but I can't share them for obvious reasons.
Kind of some stealth mode things going on.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite interesting. With all these machines, and I know this isn't maybe your specialty, but have y'all had a lot of problems with vandalism of the machines or people doing?
No, I think so these machines are all installed inside the agent shop because agent also earns, it's a revenue model for them. So they take care of it. And so there haven't been I would say any such situation like that. And so
and I guess it's like you mentioned, it's ethanol, so nobody's been trying to break in and steal it for alcohol consumption or anything like that.
Correct. I think there's a lot of security already put in place to ensure that the fleet, when it moves from the petrol stations to these dispensing units, they are secure. The drivers, the teams, they are trained enough. Or trained well, I would say, to take care of those things. So yeah, I mean, so far it has been all good.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Well, I guess while you're here in Nairobi, outside of KOKO, what type of things do you enjoy doing when you're here?
I think Nairobi is more like a paradise to me. It is really a mix of both, where you have the work as well as good personal life. So I really enjoy hiking, and so just 2 months back in December, I did Mount Kenya. So that was one of the wonderful experience. Then did a couple of other hikes, Mount Longonot and all. And then now we make a point that if for example, we are going Mount Longonot, we start at say 5 in the morning. We do the whole circuit and come back by noon. So lunch you have to have at home.
Yeah, so, that's pretty intense. I know my son did that whole journey up to Mount Kenya.
Yeah.
Do you find it a pretty challenging endeavor to do?
Yes, it is. It is pretty challenging, and I think I somehow appreciate the way things are because there were points where there was no mobile network. So at some point we were just feeling that shouldn't there be a mobile network set up here? But then it's yes, you can set it up, but then what's the point of if you have connectivity throughout, you would have some newbie working with a laptop here. Let it be natural.
Yeah, you need, when you're doing those things, it's more about the piece of it and you
exactly
kind of being in nature.
Yeah,
that's quite crazy. I know. I mentioned I have kind of bad eyesight vision, so I don't do a lot of hikings. I mean, small things like the Ngong Hills, something like that, maybe, but. I haven't quite ventured up to Mount Kenya yet. I think it would be quite an interesting challenge.
I think you should definitely try.
Definitely try it out and just try to see if I can make it all the way to at least the minor top there.
We are planning to do next Kilimanjaro.
Yeah.
So maybe this year or the next.
That's a bucket list type of thing. I think people really. You just have access to these type of things.
Exactly.
Quite easy to.
I think the government bodies have maintained these things and they have preserved the natural part as well. And a lot of effort is to put into ensure that they are clean. So even if thousands of tourists are coming, you wouldn't find it so it's still okay, not so dirty where you see huge plastics of trash. So I think those are some good things that have been there in place.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think there's always this misconception that a lot of us tech guys were just in front of the computer all the time, but you're up on top of Mount Kenya with no phone or anything.
I think that's in a way a reality, right? A lot of tech guys are on their screens most of the time. There are situations where you receive some email communication, something going on the weekends as well, but that doesn't mean that they're just there. I think the good part at least in I think it's there in everywhere, but it's more visible in Kenya, where you have these opportunities where people take off. And in general, we also encourage people to take offs. I am a very bad holiday taker, so I have like tons of holidays left, but my management like just ensures or asks that, hey guys, just take a break.
Yeah, just there's so much to see and do. There's so many places to go.
Yeah,
it's kind of the perfect weather. There's so many nice things that you can be enjoying, and there's no reason to be stuck in front of the screen. Well, that's good that your company kind of has that policy. I mean, I think it really helps with what they call work-life balance and making sure you don't get too burned out, because I know the job can be very intense from what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
I guess, these days there's a kind of an AI craze going on. Do you guys use AI much in your platform right now? Or is it something where you...
So, I mean, that's a very interesting question. And I would say like, I'm sure like all of our viewers would be interested in it. AI is like really the hot topic. Everybody is talking about AI, but like important is to understand like what is AI, what is its capability, and what would you want to do it for yourself and for others. So yes, we do use AI in a lot of the use cases. We are also evaluating a lot of the AI use cases for us because we have these devices there. So is there some sort of machine learning model that we could deploy which would notify or to help us do some predictive maintenance? Is there something proactive that we could learn that, we are seeing some sort of latency building up, and if it strikes this threshold, then most likely your systems may go down. So we're experimenting those those on the operation side. On the innovation side, another like exploring some other tools. So to make the developer more proficient. So those are few other tools, and then also exploring because there's one line of business where you have this fuel dispensing machines and all, but what else can you do? Because there is opportunity where you can live your own ad network on top of it. How can you build it? So we have it, but can I optimize it further? Can I do something? So there are some avenues that we are exploring in that space.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because, the AI craze, I don't remember exactly when it started. Maybe it's been maybe 2 years now. 2 years about. Yeah. And these LLMs came in and everybody's like, AI, it became the craze. And like you mentioned, for a long time now, we have had this idea of machine learning, which I guess you'd say is a subset of AI, which we've been, we've had the need for these models for quite a while, to be doing machine learning. We have it with SafeBoda. We need to, know which drivers are likely to take trips and be able to prioritize them based on their behaviors. And there's lots of data analysis that goes in with those type of machine learning models. But it's kind of like those didn't quite get the craze of, like they've been there, but then now is like we have the LLMs, and I guess now that elevated it to the executive level, where people can see like, I just typed something in and now I get all this results, and now everybody has to be AI focused now. It's kind of an interesting to see that shift over the years. Yeah,
I think like it's very important to keep speed with AI to understand what are its possibilities as well as limitations. It does give sometimes wrong answers, so we need to train our staff that don't 100% rely on it. Otherwise,
the development tools like to help. We use like the GitHub Copilot, these tools that help you with coding and programming.
And for me, like it really reminds me of the Stack Overflow. When the Stack Overflow came, that people said that, now the developers would no longer be needed. But it's not like that. It's like your buddy, or it's like your duck typing, as we say. There is somebody as a co-pilot, somebody to assist you, and use it like an assistant.
Yeah, but you have to still be the one in control of it to make sure you're not making mistakes, because it does make a lot of mistakes. So I think that's something for young developers out there to know that you can't just get a job by typing what comes into Copilot or these other tools. Well, that's quite interesting. So, what do you kind of see for the next steps for you within KOKO? Like what are you continuing to grow your team? The company's still growing pretty rapidly.
Yes. So, like for myself, I'm like mostly a happy-go-lucky person. So I'm still, I would say, learning. And the part of my reason for my movement to Kenya was to learn how businesses are built and run. So that's on my learning radar that I want to do next for myself. In terms of the company, the plan is to like grow and like launch more innovative products for the customers that we have, and even like those tools that we have, how can we make them more optimized in terms of the services, the cost, etc. So focusing, that would be the primary focus, and long term would be to do like doing the learning.
Sure. What would you tell, the young version of yourself? Like if you were, 22, 23 years old, what kind of advice would you give yourself to kind of get to the accomplished career that you currently have?
I think like I would just say like don't stress too much about life. I would personally classify myself as a very stressful sort of a personality. For young ones, I would just say like keep on looking for learning things. Anything that comes on your way, and I've seen this in a lot of people that I work with, don't have any biases towards any technology. One of the things that I've seen, like people have that, oh, I'm a backend developer, I'm a front end developer, and they just stick to it, and they are so strong at that. There are occasions where they miss out on some other big opportunities where if they were just open to it, of course you do say 50% of your lovable technology, but rest of the times if you're open, then it would just open some other avenues. So for the young ones, I would just say like be curious, look out for whatever comes in your way, like whatever interesting things you have. I really find internship as very nice model where you get to learn something new from the organization and just to see the industry. Look for that. There are lead code and all. So for especially the programmers to hone your skills. But yeah, I mean, try learning, try experimenting. There's no right and wrong. That's what I would say. Especially when I started with C++ back in those days, people would say like, oh, C++ is the life. Then Java came, high level language. Then it was like Java is the life. But now Python is, then it's like every few years, it's like doctors, a new virus, new thing would come. So you have to adapt yourself to be open and try learning.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like being open and being flexible and not getting stuck on one path. I think that, like you said, to you, some people like, I'm a back-end engineer. Reminds me, I used to have a friend who was a very serious physicist, and he was very much into the theoretical physics, and we were trying to set him up on a date with another girl, another physicist. Said, oh, this is a nice girl. She's a physicist, and she really liked him, and they were talking, and I asked him, well, what do you think about this girl and going on the date? He said, no, I can't do it. I can't. I said, well, why not? He said, well, she has the wrong kind of physics. She's a experimentalist, and I'm a theorist. It will never work. So, the people get so into their mind about, they can't see the opportunity right in front of them sometimes.
Exactly. So, I think that's really stands out. What, if I may ask, so you, how has been your experience for the newbies, if you would like to share? And especially now, I've seen you when I met you as a very technical person in that conference, and now you're doing podcast where now meeting different people. So how has been your experience?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of like the advice that I would give to the younger people, for sure, I think kind of resilience. I think what's interesting that I see is, and this has really come across in a lot of the podcasts that we've done, is, people kind of have these career highs and then something happens, right? Or something goes wrong, or life changes. You don't know where you will be, next year or the year after. And so a lot of times hard things come, you go through the job life and things don't turn out exactly how you thought it would, or maybe you get stuck in a bad position, or the company doesn't go the way you think it's going to go. And just that you're having resilience to know it's going to be okay. The next day will come. If there's a storm happening right now, it'll be all right. I always, anytime something has gone really wrong, I just could say like, well, what's really the worst case scenario that could happen here?
True.
Even when like the systems are crashing or whatever. Okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? Okay, it takes us a couple days to get the system back up and running. We lose, we have a bad experience. We lose customers, but it'll be okay. So I think that resilience, that's something that I've always tried to do, is to, just to keep pushing forward and, always look to what the next opportunity is. And I think for me particularly, it's just kind of all about learning, the continual learning. Like the market is always changing. Today we have AI and DeepSeek and these things. Tomorrow it'll be something else. I mean, throughout my career, it's like you said, it's one day it's Java, next day it's C++, the next day it's this, it's always, kind of moving and fluid. And you can't be the master of everything, but, particularly from my, place as CTO, it's kind of understanding all these topics at a pretty decent level. You don't have to be the master at everything. You can't be the master at everything.
I think you're mentioning a very nice point, and which I have also experienced, that when you're learning something, just learn it like just at least one technology or whatever, learn it to the core. So understand that, okay, how does it even runs at a very basic system level? And for others, it would be easy for you to correlate and move ahead, because most of these, the basic phenomena is still the same. It's still running on the similar compute engine. So as long as you understand basics for one language, then other language technology is just a concept that you have to apply.
Yeah, exactly. And like what I do is, let's say if the new topic of the day is, let's say, Kubernetes, right? So there's a lot of these buzzwords we throw around, but we have Kubernetes is the technology we're going to talk about. Well, if I want my team to adopt that, what I will do is I will go, I'll actually, install it on my machine. I'll run through all the commands, learn how it works at the basics. I'm not going to be the expert when, if I go into a Kubernetes interview and go into the very deep, fine-grained details of it, I wouldn't be able to do that well at the interview. But when I'm talking with my staff and, trying to make decisions, I know enough that, that I can make an educated decision about what needs to happen, and have the respect to say, like, okay, I understand what you're saying there. I may not be able to know, how exactly would you run this very specific command to do some very intricate thing. I know the things I know. So that, like I said, there's certain technologies that I've gone deep into and really understand them very well. But as a tech leader, you can't understand everything. You can't understand every service on AWS and every service on GCP and every service on Azure and every type of server and every type of tech, you just can't learn it all, right?
I mean, AWS themselves, like, they are so innovative. They launch new level of compute engine every few years. So it is tough to keep up with yourself. But
that's what's the problem too, is if you really, let's say you learn AWS really well and then you move to your next job and they use Google's cloud, then it's like, well, but it's transferable, but it's, at the same time, you're now starting again. So it's good to be flexible, I guess.
Correct. I think, like, you brought up an interesting question. So at some point when we were exploring or like AWS, or using AWS a lot, somebody said that, are you into GCP and Azure as well? And then we were actually evaluating that, should we have our applications deployed on all the three cloud environments, because some companies have done it. But then the real answer was that, why have they done it? Is it their use case? Are you building some sort of a technology where you need to build everything for every use case, or what is it? And then that's where really the answer was, that understand your problem well and how are you serving it in the most cost-effective way. That's the key.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think that's always the critical thing. And there's so many debates online. I mean, you get, whatever the topic is, there's always very strong opinions in the tech community. Tech guys, I think, particularly the super genius ones, they're very opinionated about, is it AWS? Oh, AWS is the only one I'll use. I won't touch Azure. I won't touch anything else. I do this. Or it might be programming languages, or it might be certain types of software development patterns. If you're not doing this, you're not doing the right thing. But I found kind of more the success is look at the problem. What is it? Why am I doing this? I'll give you an example. So with SafeBoda, we had some investment with Google, and of course it would make a lot of sense with investment for Google to move over to use Google's cloud, right? And we definitely talk with them a lot about that, because it makes a lot of sense. Okay, Google's investing, you want to move over to Google's cloud. But we also have to weigh out the cost of what would it take our team to do that migration from Amazon to Google. It takes time, it takes resources, it takes things. So, it's not just, well, here's what, here's the solution, just do this. You have to, as a tech leader, you have to look at this and say, okay, what makes sense? What can we negotiate on? What makes the best sense longer for the company? So, I mean, those things are always coming up as a tech leader. You always are having to evaluate those things.
And I think, like, the solution really lies is how are you responding to these questions, and who would answer these things? Because they are usually thrown at the business that, okay, there's a new investment from company which favors some other company, then change your course. But then do you have the technical acumen to really evaluate that, okay, this is, and I think like it's also about the risk and financial assessment of it, and then really taking a call. So out here, like, because we have these different teams, it really helps us to evaluate that, because some team specialize in the cloud technology. So they really become the decision makers or help in making a sane decision. And likewise for the development technology, because at some point Golang was picking up very well. And so like, oh, if you're a Python shop, then look for Golang. And it's like, okay, why am I using Golang? We did it for a project and we realized that it's nice, but we don't have the capacity to scale. So let's keep it for just...
Well, that was one of the probably the hardest technology decisions I had to look at, because when I started with SafeBoda, the technology stack was moving to a programming language called Elixir. I don't know if you know about Elixir, but Elixir is a functional programming language used by WhatsApp. Discord, I think, uses Elixir. It's a very high performance, built on Erlang. You know, it's very high. I mean, very, very smart guys are working in Elixir. The challenge that we had in Elixir works very performant. It's a very good language for the type of application that we're doing. Problem is nobody in East Africa knows Elixir.
Exactly.
Or at least, not that nobody knows it. 1% of developers focus on Elixir. There's a pretty vibrant community of Elixir developers here, but it's very small. Comparatively to which we started moving to JavaScript and the Node.js situation, because probably 60%. I don't know the exact numbers, but there's a large group of staff that know that technology stack and can work with it. And are there trade-offs there? Yes. I mean, Elixir is probably more performant, but actually when we moved to the Node.js stack, we really didn't have any, we were just as performant, just as we didn't have any degradation of the application, moving from a really fancy, really, pure way of programming to, okay, using something that's more mainstream, but I guess it's kind of like having a car, right? You have a Mercedes or a Toyota. Well, the Toyota is still going to get you there, the same way. Now, if you're looking for some extra bells and whistles and features, then you're going to go for the Mercedes. But so that's what kind of one of the experiences that was really eye opening for me, because you would think like the language is pushed as being like this super high performant thing, and really you have to have it. And
I think like that also reminds like even the decisions that we make. I remember we had like one of the instance where Java collections was introduced back in those days. And one of my friend was working with JP Morgan at that time. And then they said like, let's introduce collections into this mainstream programming. They took almost 6 months for assessment. And in the other startups, we were like, just let's use it because it's new and fancy. But then they said like, look, we don't use technology for just the sake of it. I have like huge financial calculations running on it. So even if I make a mistake of 0.000%, when the number runs with billions of transactions, there's huge thing at stake. So I think like it's really important to assess those things. But I think also we should keep an open eye, try experimenting. Because whatnot, like maybe one of your services is still running in Elixir and it works well. Yeah,
exactly. Well, that's what we ended up doing. We our high performant, like one of our services, we left it with Elixir, but we moved a lot. The ones that for instance, if you're doing like example of we offer promotion codes to users, 20% off your next ride. That doesn't need Elixir to be like so fast, but when you're trying to match drivers and passengers in real time, thousands of people moving across the city, that requires something quite fast and very performant. So, we kind of, again, just look at the situation and what makes sense. So, it's always hard as a technical leader to be able to do that. Well,
piggybacking on one of the previous question, like how has been your experience with podcast? Meeting different people, and how is it?
I think it's really exciting. Like you mentioned, Nairobi has this like great tech community that's here, and it's kind of not well known to the rest of the world. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this, to kind of showcase what companies are doing out there. Like I would think somebody in Europe probably doesn't know that there's a company, here in East Africa that's like done, get these kind of vending machines for, these type of products, right? I mean, we're talking to all kinds of interesting people. We talked to a guy yesterday who has a similar type of technology they're doing smart lockers.
Okay.
Like you go to an event and you need to put your bag inside, and it's a smart locker IoT technology. We've talked to people who have applications doing, kind of more like ERP systems, working with small businesses like salons and different, how do you collect payments and do scheduling for all these type of businesses. There's so many different things. I mean, I've worked, of course, I work with Safepoto, which is a ride-hailing company. We're trying to compete with Uber and Bolt and these huge companies with multi-thousand engineers with a very lean team here in East Africa, which we're actually doing quite successfully in Uganda. We have there's so many technologies that are here. I mean, we've talked a lot about farming technologies. People out there with IoT solutions for farming. I mean, every industry, there's something interesting happening here.
True.
And so really to get exposure to that, let people know what the tech leaders are doing here, and just really showcase like, hey, this is an emerging market here. And really, they're saying, the next 20, 30 years could be the time for Africa to really shine, to really be the world leader. I mean, obviously from India, India's got a lot of competition coming. There's a lot of...
I think it's a global shift. For me, like one of the best examples of where I wanted some help with YouTube, where I ran into some issue, and then I tried reaching their support team, and it was I think like 10 p.m. EAT. Somebody in Vietnam responded with me, and they helped me resolve the query. But for me, like that, your problem can happen in any part of the world, but the person who is solving it doesn't need to be in the same place, same time zone.
Right.
And I think that was the key takeaway. So how do we make it happen? And that has been our experimentation as well, that we build like yours, like a lean team, which is able to serve the customers across the globe. And then how do we make it in the most systematic, most financially viable way? And I think like climate tech is a real big space out everywhere. So yeah, let's see.
Yeah, I think it's time for Africa really to shine. And I think, guys like you who are coming in and, really helping to set up that structure and helping to add an order to the chaos that's there, and really, help manage the teams and be sure that we really have these things heading into the future. I think it's the right way to go for sure. Yeah. So yeah, well, it's been great having you on the podcast. So any other questions you have for me, or any other topics you'd like to cover?
No, I think like it has been a very nice conversation with you, and I really look forward to the output of this, because I feel that this is going to go a long way. You're going to inspire many people to do more of this, where people are able to like people are already sharing on the other social media platforms, but this would make it a more mainstream thing. So I wish you all the best, and thank you for having me.
Yes, it's been great having you here, Samir, and we'll try to do this again sometime, and we can dive a little bit deeper into some other topics. And it's been just great having you here. So thanks again. And remember, on the Nairobi Gold Rush podcast, we're trying to help you get the gold. So hopefully you've learned something from Samir, and he can his advice will help you to really go into the future and see what it takes to become a great tech leader like he is. And hopefully you learned a lot from this podcast. So we look forward to talking to you next time.
Asante sana, Scott.
Asante sana.